What's up, guys? Back with another video. We're gonna talk about something that it's pretty related to the last video that I did. um, and it's a little more fundamental to the whole problem with the housing market, and fundamental, in my opinion, to a lot of the problems that people rightfully are complaining about in our country right now. And the title is, essentially the thesis of this video. It's meant to rub some people the wrong way, and I stand by it 100%. And we're going to talk about why. So, the thesis of this video is that housing is not a right, a human right, however you want to frame it. And, you hear this a lot, people claiming, oh, housing is a human right. Other examples and other things, people talk about healthcare as a human right, a living wage is a human right. This fundamental misconception about what rights are is essentially the bedrock of what causes all of these things to be problems in the first place. Now, let's explain. Why do I say that? Well, what does the creation of housing entail? It entails capital, materials, labor. Where do those come from? People working to create them. So, the underlying problem with thinking about this way, with understanding rights as this is essentially the positive versus negative rights distinction. And I'll explain that a little bit as we go through the video. But the problem with this way of thinking is that what you're saying is that you have a right to other people's labor. That's slavery. And hopefully we can agree, slavery bad, right? Hopefully. Well, I don't know, maybe not. Guess we'll see. And that goes for healthcare. That goes for living wages. You're essentially arguing that you're entitled to other people's time and energy and effort, their labor, their life. You're saying that you're entitled to part of my life by saying this. And that's true whether you were to point a gun at my head and say, build me a house. But the principle still applies when we do this thing in our current political system and we vote to take resources away from other people in order to build housing for people. That's the same thing in a different system. It's a systematized stealing of labor, indentured servitude. And no matter how you configure this scheme to rob people of their time and energy and effort and labor, their life, no matter how you configure that scheme, it's wrong, it's slavery, it's immoral. So, that's the claim, that's the fundamental claim. Now, What are positive and negative rights? Well, negative rights are, in my opinion, an understanding of rights as things that you are born with that can't be taken away from you, right? So I have a right to my life. I have a right to the fruits of my labor. I have a right to own property that I voluntarily, contractually obtain, right? And positive rights, on the other hand, although the connotation makes it sound like, oh, that's a good thing, positive rights. No. That means, well, I have a right to your labor to build me a house. I have a right to your property through taxation to achieve whatever political agenda I want. To healthcare, to, I have a right to steal through taxation and, enact whatever political agenda I desire. That's what positive rights framing is. And that's all of them are not rights. You're obfuscating what a right is. And this is in big part a problem of mass media, our political system, the school system, all of that. They're all responsible for this confusion, deliberative confusion. So let's start with a really basic concept and premise of, how this works and economic theory. A favorite, sort of hypothetical of economic theories are, the desert island, the Crusoe Island hypothetical. So say there's, I don't know, whatever. There's 100 people. They're on an island. They're not in any way, shape, or form connected to the outside world. And those 100 individuals on this island, of course, in order to survive, are going to, have different, there's going to be a bunch of different labor tasks that are involved in their survival. And then hopefully their growth as a community. So somebody's going to be foraging, somebody's going to be, chopping down trees and trying to build shelters. Somebody's going to be fishing. Somebody's going to be building a raft and trying to, either be more effective at fishing or connect to another economy or something. There's going to be all these individuals. There's going to be a diversification of the labor. Not everybody is going to split the labor equally and, each one of us is going to do 100 different tasks, but we're each going to do 1/100th of the total of those. No, it's going to be like, this group's going to do this, that group's going to do that. People are going to separate. And, then you have one person, and this is how politics works, who has created a weapon, an instrument of force. That's what politics is. It's essentially a substitute for violence, and so now this person with the knife or with the weapon or whatever is going to claim that, well, first of all, they're going to claim power because they're the one with the instrument of violence. They have the means to violence, the monopoly on violence. If you're, you've read any Rothbard or libertarian theory. And the thing is that although they have a strategic advantage in violence, if the other 99 came at them, they'd probably lose the fight still. And this is kind of a very bare bones analogy for how our political system works. But anyway, to keep some of these people happy and some of them on his side, he's going to start coming up with these political slogans like, well, you guys that don't have shelter yet, you have a right to shelter. You have a right to this or that, Politics is really just selling the masses on you're going to give them more stuff. That's kind of the whole game. Whoever can promise the more stuff to people that they don't have, that's who typically wins the popularity contest. And so, as that happens, what's the politician really promising? What they're really promising is, I'm going to use the threat of my capability to violence and your want for, in a more developed economy, goods and services that you don't currently have the means to attain, in order to enslave other people to provide those things for you. That's kind of really how it works. That's what it boils down to. When a politician in our day and age is saying, you have a right to housing, you have a human right to housing. Well, what's he actually saying? All he's saying is, if you put me in power, if enough of you vote for me, I will, through the means of the government, through the bureaucratic agencies that control various segments of the economy, I'm going to force some segment of the economy, aka private individuals that are creating things that have wealth, I'm going to force them to fund housing for you. And so, over time, the way this is played out in our world is that there's more taxes over time. There's more regulations over time. And the burden of those taxes and those regulations makes it less profitable for housing to be built. So there's less incentive for housing to be built. So less housing gets built. So you're choking supply. And then the only stuff that's getting built right now, and if you look around, this is obviously the case, luxury housing still gets built. There's still new builds if it's high-end housing. And low-income subsidized housing gets built. AKA, the government is paying somebody with tax revenue, or created money out, or they created money out of thin air, which is still a tax on you, in order to fund low-income housing, selling that to you as a public good, meanwhile pretending it was free, meanwhile actually stealing money from productive people in society who are making good use of their money, because that's how you actually get wealthy. Well, in an ideal system, it's how you get wealthy. In our system, it's a little more complicated than that, because there's this whole government apparatus that you can get wealthy through, not through free exchange. But, the productive private individuals, let's say the middle class, right? People, small business owners, those people have their income stolen to pay for low-income housing. And then people are like, where's the middle class going? The middle class is robbed to provide health care for people that don't want to pay for health care. And, you know, that's sold by politicians as a public good, sold by the media as a public good. And then people go, where's the middle class going? Well, I don't know, guys. Maybe your political ideology has stolen from them for decades and decades, and now there are less of them and there are more people in the lower income bracket. I don't know. Maybe that it seems like that math makes sense to me. It's pretty basic, but you know, and the thing is that, oh, well, we should tax the rich more. We should tax the rich more. Okay, but if you know anything about government expenditures, you could literally confiscate all the wealth of all the billionaires. It would run the government for like a month, maybe. And then what? All of those multi-billion-dollar companies are out of business because you stole all their assets and capital. How many jobs did you just eliminate? How much future potential growth did you just destroy from the economy? You know, these people that advocate for these policies really don't understand like second and third order effects. And, you know, that's the game of politics, is talking about the first order effects of said policy and ignoring all the unintended consequences that flow downstream of that. And then going, oh, I don't know, guys, I can't figure out why we destroyed the middle class, and the housing market is a wreck, and it costs so much more to do everything now, and everything costs more, and blah, 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 blah. It's super obvious why. All you have to do is pay attention for 5 minutes. All you have to do is stop listening to politicians for 5 minutes and learn like economics 101. It's really simple. So back to our original claim here, and just trying to get people to wrap their head around the fact that indentured servitude is bad. And, you know, back to our, okay, so this guy with the gun on the island, right? Or whatever weapon of choice you have here. By ordering people around, by conscripting people to provide labor for other people to achieve their political power and enshrine their political power, has this person contributed anything to the economy on this island? No. No. So you could have had two people building houses, right? But instead what you have is one person pointing a gun at another, ordering that one person to build the house. And then we go, well, that should make housing cheaper, right? No. You know, in order for things to be cheaper, you need a bigger supply than you have demand. You know, you need to grow supply relative to demand over time. That's how things get cheaper. And so the more you have this bureaucratic administrative bloat, the more people that are getting rich, or at least making an income because there's a problem in the housing industry. Well, those people are not contributing anything to the housing industry in general. They're not building more houses. They're making it more costly to build more houses. That's what every person who is part of any bureaucratic agency that's enforcing, you know, oh, well, how do those people get paid? Through tax money. So the more of those people you have, the more taxes we need to pay those people to do their jobs, the more wealth is extracted out of the private economy and given to the public sector. And the double whammy is that also those people are enacting policies, enacting regulations that make it more costly to build more housing, which is the actual only fix to the problem. You need to build more housing in order to lower costs of housing. So this whole socialist scheme of, well, we need to regulate more, we need to tax more, we need... No. You're adding costs to houses being built. You are the guy on the island with the gun telling other people to build more houses instead of picking up a hammer yourself and doing it. You are the problem while masquerading as the solution. That's politics in a nutshell. So just really the main point that I wanted to get across on this video, and I know I went on some tangents and blah, blah, yeah, I don't know. It's my second video about this stuff. I'll get better, maybe not. But what I really want to get across is that you have a right to go out there and work as hard as you want and make as much money as you possibly can. You have a right to contractually agree to purchase property. Other than that, you don't, like, all this other stuff is just a politician promising you other people's labor. And then, they're creating an incentive, and this is the whole game. These politicians have an incentive to never fix these problems. As long as the problem is there, they have a platform to run on. As long as, and the other thing is that in the game of democracy, which is just a synonym for politics, one has a good connotation, one has a bad connotation. Same word, same meaning. But, people are incentivized to promise lots of free stuff. And if you're not the guy promising all the free stuff, you're probably going to get wrecked. That's why supposed fiscal conservatives would never dare say a word about Social Security, the Ponzi scheme that it is, because you lose tons of votes. And votes are the real currency here in the democracy. So, you don't have a right to my labor, but our whole system is built on you having a right to my labor, a right. AKA, you're allowed to vote for politicians to confiscate my wealth, to confiscate what I've worked for. And the can of worms of bad incentives that this opens is literally the underlying problem with our whole economic system. Every single issue in our country is due to these bad incentives of democracy. That's a bigger can of worms than we're going to get into today, I guess. It's already kind of a long video, but, I think these are things you should really chew on for a bit, because this is kind of the underlying problem with everything. Oh, you want cheaper housing? Get the government out the way. Slash the regulatory burdens. Assuming we're always going to have taxes because we've just indoctrinated people into believing that that's the only way to pay for certain goods and services that people need. Assuming that, okay, you want more housing? Make tax breaks for people who build more housing. How about that? Oh no, that would deprive the state of its, yeah, well, okay, can't have it both ways. So just think about that, guys. Also, you know, as always, there's going to be plenty of people that disagree with my analysis. That's good. You should disagree. Let's argue about it. I'm open to it. I was just arguing with some guy on Facebook about this very thing. You know, if you're a government defender, I want to argue with you. Otherwise, really contemplate how this relationship between government involvement and things costing more. And we didn't even dip into the inflationary aspect of this, but try to understand and take a look at this. Look at different sectors of the economy. Which ones have more government involvement, which have less? Which ones cost more over time, which get cheaper over time? Compare higher education or health care or housing. Compare those to technology. You know, flat screen TVs. Why did flat screen TVs get cheaper over time? Why does everything get cheaper over time absent government intervention? All right. Well, you know, that's the video. Argue with me in the comments. Tell me why I'm wrong. Make your argument. You know, tell me I'm a bad person because I don't think you should get free stuff just because people have, you know, more than you know. I don't care. Go ahead. All right. Well, we'll do it again soon, guys. Anyway, later.